welcome to everyone. First, I would like to welcome and thanks all our speakers for today. Without the name, I will leave the name for Jay to list you one by one. And I will also would like to thanks our participant, okay, who do register already. I'm not sure if everyone is in, but we have registration very good this time, ahead of time, but of course some people come in and out. So just I want to welcome everyone. I would like to be in touch with you after, as I said. We will manage to make a digital newsletter special for this event, for this panel, virtual panel, and then we'll talk. I will leave everything to Jay, and I will say thank you very much again, and welcome.
Thank you, Toni.
Thank you, Tony. So first, I want to start by recognizing the great job Telecom Review and yourself, you guys have done in continuing to connect the telecom industry leaders and to discuss the current topics that impact us as a whole. So when you named it virtually connecting the industry leaders, it's truly a representation of the topic of this seminar. So from here, I think what I want to start with just a quick context of this panel. The fact that we have moved from speculation earlier in the year on the impact of COVID-19 on the economy, a lot of people were talking about how the telecom sector is going to react, but it was not based on facts. It was actually based on speculation of what the impact would be. 9 months into the pandemic, I think we have seen now on the field in our hands what's happening, and we can actually now explain more about the impact we had on the technology and telecom, how the leaders in each sector in the industry have adapted, and what are their views of the future. So one of the topics I would like to spend time on as well towards the end is the existing of the gap that is current between the companies that have digitally transformed and the ones that have not. So this is a gap that exists, and what can be done as telco leaders to accelerate that transformation. So let me start by going around and introduce our panelists in the order I see them on the screen, actually. So first, we have with us Ghazi Atallah. He's CEO of NXN. Fuad Siddiqui, he's Vice President and Executive Partner at Nokia Bell Labs. Richard Ullenius, he's Vice President of Global Managed Services, CSG. Charbel Khneisser, he's Regional Director of Riverbed. Abdulla Al Jaziri, he's Vice President of Corporate Strategy of Etisalat Group. Abdul Rahman Thehaiban, SVP Oracle, Middle East and Africa and Central East Europe. And last but not least, Haithem Alfaraj, he's the Senior Vice President of Technology and Operations Unit as STC. So I know Haithem has to leave in the next 30 minutes or so, so I truly want to take full advantage of his presence and really start the question of, now that most of the industries in both public and the private sectors, they have realized the importance of digital transformation. So it's no longer about an if, it's no longer about a theory, now it's about execution. So what can they do to accelerate their digital transformation, and what is the role that you see telcos play in this transformation process? So Haithem, I'll start with you on that question.
I'm not sure if you can hear me well, but thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Tony, and the team in Telecom Review for taking this opportunity. It's a pleasure really to be part of this esteemed colleagues joining that session. But if we're going to talk about digital transformation, I think the concept or the trend I can recall that it started. It's an 8-10 years trend that companies started talking about their intention really to transform to be in the digital space. But I think COVID-19 was a really wake-up call for most of the organization really to accelerate their digital transformation plan. And even if you look into the statistics, even prior COVID, you see that very little percentage for companies that really succeeded in their digital transformation. And what succeeded, I think, in that era those startups, those companies that really established in 2007, 2008, and we have seen lots of the digital hyperscaler really have accelerated very well compared to the incumbent companies. It's a fact, as we have seen probably from COVID, that digital penetration and digital transformation has definitely will play a substantial impact in companies' revenues, and we'll start seeing a massive impact in the economy at large. I would assume that organizations really start to accelerate their digital transformation plan, and there are multiple dynamics, I would say, that can ensure the success for any organization really to succeed in their and this goes back into revamping company strategy, looking into their prioritized, I'll follow a prioritized based approach really to determine which path of the digital transformation based on the impact on the company. So the strategy refresh is an important key pillar. From a technology side, I would say that people talks about now the hybrid IT, and mastering hybrid IT is one of the key steps in the overall journey to accelerate the digital transformation. And especially for us as the technology people, we realize the importance that we need to be 2 steps ahead from the business really to accelerate. Other dynamic in digital transformation, companies really need to look into, or they need to put their advanced analytics capabilities at the core of their business, and this is going to play a major role really to differentiate their products and services. We have an example in STC that really help us really to overcome the challenge that we have during COVID when we launch our MySTC app, where we have 80-90% of company services. So the super app concept will start really appealing in the majority of the organizations. Our organization need to make sure that designing the customer stories and the application experience is crucially important. We should not also neglect the culture part of organization. And I think organization need to give higher focus on the culture and try to promote what we say the digital mindset culture in the organization, promote the innovation mindset within the company really to be able to probably promote more proactive services and try to understand customer needs. Productivity is another, and workforce is another dimension that organization definitely need to look into because the dynamics that we have seen and the impact of COVID will really will push organization really to look into their productivity and performance measurements moving forward to make sure that we address that business continuity risk that never been seen in the past. So those are all of those dimensions I think that are important really to consider a part of redesigning or reshaping digital transformation within the companies.
Okay, great. Before I continue, I want to apologize to Jihad. I missed your name. I told you I need my reading glasses. So Jihad Tayara, he's CEO of Evoteq. He's also one of our esteemed panelists here today.
Thank you, Jay. I thought you would do it and you could. No worries.
It's your fault. You told me you need the cool glasses, so it's not my fault in this case. So Haithem, you mentioned hybrid ICT. Can you expand on that concept and how it can help with the overall process of transformation?
Well, basically, if we look into digital transformation, this will involve many IT organizations and companies really to promote what we call the open architecture. And I'm sure that everyone is aware of probably the API ecosystems and other things. And this is, and maybe in the past organizations were limited, or their thoughts were limited really to develop everything in source. But with the interconnections that we're going to see between service providers, cloud brokers, and customers, we're going to see that concept of moving to a hybrid cloud. So internal clouds infrastructure that usually, for example, in telcos, what we do, eventually will have to integrate with, cloud hyperscalers and others to make sure that and this is not an easy journey that you take, and this goes through a very deep architectural complexity, but I think it's important. The concept of partnership And this is, especially if I speak about the telecom industry, was very weak in the concept of partnership, and we probably have seen it. And in order really to accelerate that digital journey, that integration or that concept have to be really enforced moving forward.
Okay, the great clarification. So what I have for this panel is a slightly different approach than what we usually do, which is it's important at this stage to get different perspectives of the same question. So we have less questions, more meaningful questions, but we want to have different views on the same topic. So the question to Abdullah in this case, what is Etisalat's view on the role of the telecom sector overall and the telco operators specifically in that transformation, to accelerate that transformation?
Thank you, Jay. 2020 so far has been difficult for everybody across the globe. Most countries were not prepared to face the challenge and impact of this pandemic. However, one positive impact of this pandemic is the acceleration of digital transformation. And I'd like to start with highlighting His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid's statement that anyone who thinks that the world after COVID-19 will be the same as the one before it is mistaken. So there's a new norm. And the UAE has long before recognized the importance of digital and ICT. And this is started from the year of 2000, where the UAE set up the internet city in Dubai, followed by the launch of e-government in 2001 and the mobile government in 2013. So in UAE, the digital transformation is a journey, and everybody's participating. The outcome of the journey was demonstrated from the beginning of this pandemic, where a lot of countries, they suffered in the beginning of the pandemic. People had been requested to stay at home, while here in UAE, we have been requested to work from home. Students and school has been suspended, and some of the countries they in the year, while here in UAE, our students continue their study. And this doesn't came from just a luck. It's a continuous work by everybody in this country. And Etisalat, the digital transformation is part of our DNA and reflected clearly in our vision: drive the digital future to empower society. And this is supported strongly by our infrastructure, being #1 in the world in terms of fiber penetration, and also being one of the top countries in the mobile broadband. At start also we completed we complement our role in the digital transformation by establishing our digital unit, Etisalat Digital, in the year of 2016, to support both the public and private sector with their digital transformation journey. It's either in the IoT, cloud, or security, which has been complemented recently with the acquisition of Help AG. So going forward, 5G also will play a major role in the digital transformation of the UAE. And we believe that most of the use cases will be tackling the enterprise and the government. And that will drive the 5G in UAE.
Okay, excellent. So when we're looking at the perspective from both STC and Etisalat, Ghazi, you are in the heart of that transformation. And so how do you reconcile between what's happening in the telco sector from their perspective with what's happening at the platform level or at the city level, which is the core business for NXN?
Thank you, Jay, and thank you for the opportunity and the time, and to be able to speak here today. It's a pleasure.
and an honor. So thank you for that to start with. So in terms of the telco's role and what's happening in the digital transformation aspects of government or enterprises at large, I think moving forward, the telco has a tremendous role to play. And then they can emphasize the idea of being the people who are providing today the connectivity, the cloud services, and cloud, the concept of cloud and delivery of services now is evolving dramatically as we speak. And the concept of cloud, where it was before as a hosting environment, is evolving to become much more of a service delivery environment rather than just infrastructure delivery environment. So that enables the telcos to play an important role and to be able to go at the heart of digital transformation and deliver the services or the capability that customers want. Now, of course, this is the ideal scenario. Is this what's happening? The requirements from cities, the requirements from governments, the requirements from enterprises in general. I do believe that the complexity of transformation is not really well understood at this stage. The ability to plan for transformation as much as execute is equally important. So the planning cycle, understanding what do we want to transform, why do we want to transform it, what are the things that are key for us in terms of attainment, what are the key KPIs, what are the key objectives, financial, operational, what have you. So these are very important elements in the planning cycle, and then being able to hit and execute on those elements. So I think the complexity of being able to manage one as a player, as a telco player, being able to manage and understand the needs and the real aspects of digital transformation as to what do you want to do, what do you want to achieve, versus the execution, and the execution at the business level, not the infrastructure level or the delivery of the common connectivity infrastructure. Those are things that telcos would have to match to be able to be very effective in digital transformation. That's the way we see it, because that's the kind of feedback and the need that we see from our customers in government or private sector.
Okay, so which really drives me into the next question. So Jihad, I mean, you have been in the digital transformation business for many years, even before Evoteq, from different angles as well. So it would be good to get your perspectives on what role the regulators and governments play, in addition to what the private sector does, in ensuring this digital transformation for both a synchronized, like Ghazi said, the reconciliation or the synchronization of private and public sides.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Tony, for inviting me, and Jay for hosting me on this panel. It's really exciting. And definitely, I mean, I just want to make a quick comment before we go into the regulation, if you allow me, on digital transformation in general. And really, it's not as much a technology story, I think, as Ghazi was alluding into, as much as it is a transformation story. So organization and companies need to understand the challenge ahead. They need to understand what's at stake and how to deal with their employees, with their customers, and what is it that they're looking for. Okay, so deploying and implementing technologies, to me, is the easiest part of the story. The story is defining what you want to achieve, where you want to go, and how do you want to achieve that. Moving forward to the regulation, and I really believe that the regulators have a big say and a big role to play now in this environment. A quotation here or a small comment on the telco sector side. So in the UAE, the regulator have a role in terms of allowing or not allowing voice over IP. That was an essential role, had an essential role in allowing people to work from home, and that's the question is still out there with Abdullah, and to do whether this will continue after COVID or not. That's very important. Beyond this, the more important question from my side is seeing how the regulators or even government organizations, more specifically, have utilized this period to push forward their transformation project. And I was really surprised and positively and pleasantly surprised when during the pandemic and when we were locked down at home, we had the most aggressive discussions with our partner from the Ministry of Health, where they were discussing the traceability project. The culmination of that was yesterday. There was a press release where it was announced that that they launched the Tatmin project. We are very proud and honored to be working with the Ministry of Health on that project. That's a traceability, a track and trace project that will be tracking all the medicine that will be coming into UAE. So Evoteq will be building the platform to allow traceability and to allow managing all the supply from manufacturing all the way to the supply chain, to pharmacies, hospitals, and to the end users. So that's extremely, we're very excited about that. And you see how proactive government, so as Abdullah was saying, in the UAE, we're very honored to have proactive government pushing the envelope and pushing for transformation and digital transformation when it's really needed.
Okay, so I think this is a very important point to discuss this platform. So let's put a pin on it towards the second half of the seminar, because we want to dive a little bit deeper when we talk about the gap and how this platform can actually close that gap. So this would be a good transition point in terms of how we manage that transformation in the marketplace. So I move back to Haithem, just because I know you have another 5 or 10 minutes max before you have to go. Same question in terms of, we heard from the UAE perspective. How is it from the Saudi perspective side, the role of CITC and regulators and other government agencies in working with the private sector, and what's the role of STC to try to bridge that digital transformation across both private and public?
Well, if you look into the kingdom, and there were lots of, I would say, cooperation and support the private sector have taken from the government, and specifically from CITC and MCIT. And there were a couple of actions that has been taken, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. People got locked down. I can speak at high level on those initiatives, giving, for example, temporary spectrum really that can boost, the performance of the existing telecom network. But I think the kingdom, if you go back 2 years back, I think in 2017, when as part of the Vision 2030, there was the digital transformation plan, and there were around 10 billion of investment that has been given through the partnership with telco providers to roll out fixed fiber networks. More than 1.2 million households has been connected. There's a lot of also agreement that has been taken between telcos and the MCIT really to promote and elevate the speed and the performance of the network. And we have seen the results nowadays in the kingdom where we are ranked as we have moved probably from 50 to top 5 countries globally in terms of mobile speed. We have also there's a lot of also regulation regime that has been also facilitated really to deal with the lockdown and the others, and we have seen the results. And I think from 2017 till today, these initiatives that has been and the support that we have seen from the government to support the telecom infrastructure had helped at least to minimize the impact of the COVID. And we have seen a lot of services and usability across either the e-commerce, the remote educations, and across different business. So this is basically in a nutshell that explains the relationship of the activities that we have taken with the government and CITC. On the data privacy and the other aspects, because I know that you're going to touch base on this, there were an institute that has been established in the kingdom that looks into pushing the minimum baseline to make sure that cybersecurity practices are well governed, lots of campaigns and educations, and promoting lots of activities with universities really that looks into the cybersecurity practices and data privacy and data safety aspects of this, because you cannot deassociate, or try. You have to consider the cybersecurity impact when you execute or accelerate your digital transformation.
Okay, great. So if we take a step back a little bit and start to think about really how it started. So Fuad, I had a question about how did the pandemic itself highlight the need? So we understand that it made it possible, but in which ways were the necessity of digital transformation take place?
All right, thanks, Jay. So delighted to be here. Learning a lot of great insights from my fellow panelists. So really, really excited. So the question that you raised, Jay, is no doubt COVID-19 has left an indelible mark on industry transformation. And I think as my fellow speakers have already discussed, that the need for digital transformation is quite apparent for all of us. What might be less apparent or obvious to all of us is some of the latent trends that it's set in place, and the global inefficiencies and the inequalities that our global world order is grappling with at the moment. And I call that as a tale of two halves, or better, tale of two unequal halves. And let me explain what I mean. So even pre-pandemic, Bell Labs has been vigorously articulating this notion of this value paradox. And what it means is this interesting dichotomy that exists between digital mature industries and what we call the physical industries. And I think, Abdullah, you talked about the enterprise and the governments and all of those things that part of the physical industries that I classify. But if you start to think about these two sectors, the digital mature and the physical, over the years, what we have done is 70% of all ICT investments, based on the research, has gone to the digital infrastructure, digital industries. But that digital industries, which has received 70% of the investments, only represent 30% of the global GDP. So there is some fundamental issues, because what we have seen over the years is that the global productivity growth rates have been declining. And part of the reasons is we've made all these investments in digital infrastructure, but we have put consumers in charge, meaning we have basically been looking at trivial entertainment, Snapchat-y type of TikTok stuff, right? Which is nothing wrong with that, but that's hardly has moved the needle in terms of human and industrial productivity. But then comes pandemic. So what happened? What did we see? Suddenly that supply infrastructure that we have built was able to somehow then move towards ensuring that we can meet this human need. So you mentioned about the telemedicine. We've seen how much accelerated demand that was in terms of getting remote health monitoring, and the same infrastructure was used. In the US alone, we've seen e-commerce go on 150% transaction volumes in 3 months. That didn't happen over the last 10 years. So suddenly what happened is, incidentally, that supply infrastructure that we have built was used for good use. But unfortunately, the physical industries that I mentioned, which is a 70% part of our global GDP, that is going to have another 2 to 3 year lag, because the supply infrastructure that is needed to unlock the value from that industry isn't there just yet, because they have different types of requirement, the mission criticality, the security, the reliability. What we have to build is infrastructure that can actually allow these industries, whether it's ports, shipping, infrastructure, logistics, warehouse, governments, all of these to drive safety, productivity, efficiency, and resiliency factor. We call it the spur factor. And once you grow this spur factor, you can manifest new value creation. And some of our research, recent research that we have done, we will be publishing a report on that in a few weeks, have shown that if we able to create a supply and demand equilibrium, then we can actually manifest the true value, which could be upwards of 8 trillion by 2030. So that manifestation of value is really important. And I also link that back to this notion of policy making and the government role, because all of these stakeholders have to come together. It's not about just talking about digital transformation. It's about thinking about how do you augment and digitize that physical industries that actually employs 75% of the workforce, only today has 25% of ICT investments, but represents 70% part of our GDP. So we in Bell Labs think over the next 10 years, there will be this massive inversion that's going to happen, the value inversion of sorts, and that's going to drive the new value creation. And there is obviously a lot of enablers that I think we heard from Haithem around hybrid IT and other things, and the whole platform strategy, how we expose the value of 5G networks, which we can talk a little bit about in the second half of the session. But that's how we see it in Bell Labs in terms of the value manifestation and the role of pandemic.
Okay, so if that's the case, then you see then COVID having an impact in terms of acceleration, but that whole process started earlier on in terms of digitizing physical industries and increasing its value. So I'll go back to Jihad again in terms of, so how do you agree with that concept in terms of it was happening and it was just an event, or how do you see COVID highlighted?
I just want to make sure we are clear on the point. So it was happening on the digital, we have sort of focused on the digital mature industries. On the physical industries, they have been largely fixated on their proprietary bespoke network solutions. And that transformation was somehow a little bit latent. Now the demand is growing up, but the supply infrastructure that we need to unlock the new value isn't there. So we have to work as an industry over the next 3 to 5 years to create a new supply infrastructure that will bring this new value paradigm that I talk about. Sorry, Jihad, over to you.
Yeah, that will add another level of complexity. So I think that will add another level of complexity to the transformation. And it's good to understand what would be the impact of that level of complexity.
I think, Fuad, I think you made a very good point. I think in other terms, let me, if you allow me, express it in other terms. I think you're talking about businesses with digital capabilities, but not digital native business. That's really a main challenge. During the pandemic, at the early days of the pandemic, we really found some of our customers that we were advising, they had everything. They bought all the licenses, they bought everything, they had the tools, but they didn't even know how to use them. So that's really a case of investment in technology, investment in tools, but really the advice of how to utilize them. And I really split this, the pandemic, the way it transformed into 3 phases. The first phase, which is the work from home phase, where you only needed those tools, right? The licenses, the tools, the Teams, the Zoom of this work. You only needed those tools to keep you, to get you up and running. Then in the second phase, and we are, I think, in the second phase for some of us, we are in the cautious come back to work. So some of us are back to work. I'm very proud and happy that we are in the office. And some of us are still resisting or taking a longer path to go to work. So that's, so in the cautious come back to work, you need a different set of tools, right? It's not only now the Teams and the Zooms of this world. You need different types of capabilities. You need IoT devices, facial recognition cameras. You need thermal scanners and sensors. And we work with a lot of organizations in providing those services. Now, the most difficult challenge and the most difficult part of it is the long-term adjustment to the new reality. And this is really where organizations have to think really deeply into their business model, how they're rooted into their activities, and how they're going to apply those changes into their business models, right? People want to consume services differently. Organizations want to consume and even offer their services differently. And that's really the challenge. And those who will adapt to the change will survive, and those who will be slow and take some slack time to adapt to change won't exist anymore. And we've seen a lot of organizations closing shop because of this. So we really need to transform the way we do business, and that's what we're trying to advise our customers, is to how to transform their business. As an example, we were working with one of the expos, and they were looking into obviously creating virtual events, right? So something like this webinar, but that's more of an expo thing. Moving directly into the virtual world is not really the challenge. The biggest challenge we're finding now, be it at work or being in those type of moves, is to manage the hybrid model. Is you're having people physically available and people in the available remotely. This is a webinar, and that's very easy to manage, to have people all in the virtual space. But how do you manage the experience of visitors of an expo when you have people visiting physically and we have someone in the virtual space? So those are questions that we really need to focus as an industry to address and to help the customers and the partners work on.
Okay, so in this case then, that will help out in that transformation are going to be the technologies themselves. So we have seen many technologies that have been talked about as the primary ones. So AI is a clear winner there, but I'm not sure, because sometimes there is a big discussion around cybersecurity. Another one is going to be around mobility and 5G, as we just discussed earlier. So there are many other prime emerging advanced technologies that are changing and shaping this and making it happen. So Abdul Rahman, from an Oracle perspective, which is a leading technology provider in this space, what is your view on the type of emerging technologies that are coming the way, leading, and how do you see the future of it?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with the panelists. Some of them are colleagues, partners, and customers. I believe we are living again in a completely new era. The era we are in is major transformation of many aspects. If we take it to the digital transformation, for example, a year ago, it was probably a strategy. Some organization has implemented it. Now it's become de facto. It has, if it's not there, then your business is at jeopardy. And I think this is something is very, very, very important to look at it. At the same time, the market landscape in the Middle East, in our region, in the MENA region, is changing rapidly for telecommunication companies, as has been mentioned earlier by Haithem and Abdullah, whereby they really need to evolve and they need to rethink their business model to pursue opportunities associated with the emerging technologies. I believe within that, if you look at it from a technology point of view, there are certain key trends, I would say. One is cloud-led transformation. I believe this is the only transformation that would accelerate, and I believe many organizations realize the importance of cloud and the high benefit of the TCO and the faster ROI they will get associated with it. Embedded artificial intelligence, again, will be key, but will be only for companies who understand how to apply it, because having an artificial intelligence, you're not able to apply it, it would have a negative impact associated with that. And we've seen this throughout the pandemic. We've seen organizations like, for example, the Ministry of Health in Saudi. Because of the high demand they've been getting, if I take an example of Saudi, which has already been replicated elsewhere, but capitalizing on our technology that has been provided, because of the high demand, they needed to develop some sort of a chatbot that would enable them to respond to information seeker rapidly. And that's itself played, I believe, a vital role here. Supply chain application has been increasingly depending on augmented reality, and which means that this is something, again, becomes part and fundamental element of their offering. Last but not least, part of the trends, I believe, is the data science, which will increase being automated and embedded into analytics and data management systems. I believe if we look at all of those trends, this is driven by cloud, digital transformation, emerging technology, specifically artificial intelligence, and not only to have it. And I believe Jihad has just mentioned at the beginning that some of the customer that is dealing with already have that technology or license, but they haven't used it. So they need to go into a learning curve to do that. Taking that into consideration, I believe whatever has been invested in the past is paying back significantly now because of the need and the reality we're facing now.
Okay. So then in this case, Richard, you heard what Abdul Rahman was saying from one perspective. What's your view on those technologies in terms of having an impact on that transformation?
Yeah, I think there are a few for sure that stand out, right? And but before I get into that, thank you to yourself, Jay, to Tony, my fellow panelists, and obviously everyone on this webinar taking your time today. So it's really great to be here today. So I think one of the first immediate response areas that we saw was companies taking action to help manage this major shift in how customers were engaging with them, right? And companies, I think early on in the pandemic, really needed to find time to think, act, and respond to customers in a different way. And to do this, they started to leverage technology to manage how they engaged with them in real time in much greater volumes than they were used to, right? And I think that is really difficult. A few examples of those, obviously the airlines, the hotel chains, who were flooded with customers wanting to talk to them and get decisions on bookings or whatever they may be, right? And they weren't really staffed to meet these high volumes and necessary decision making at kind of the pace that was required, and hence they started to turn to technology solutions. So I think COVID puts a major pressure on this shift from kind of manual business operations, or at least semi-manual operations, towards leveraging more technology. And I think two examples on that. The first one is really kind of an area to transform around customer management or customer experience using technologies, for example, like conversational AI solutions, which help move from a manually operated call center much more towards using interpretation services and solutions to proactively respond to significantly high volumes of customers that are really kind of flooding your systems, right? And then respond to them in digital channels in real time. I think that's going to be one of the solutions that will continue as we kind of progress through this pandemic. That'll be very, very important for companies. It kind of offsets a lot of the pressure on them. I think the other one is where you have companies that have significant human labor workforces that actually do go out and work with end customers, whether it's consumers or whether it's businesses, where that is at least very difficult, if not impossible, from a health perspective today. And here, using solutions that replace the need for those teams to be out physically with customers are also starting to become very popular. Leveraging technology solutions around augmented reality, where technicians can help customers remotely to solve problems or install new solutions, things like that. So I think these kind of emerging technologies around the AI space, they're definitely also a great way for companies to kind of get back fully on their feet once the crisis is over and actually build competitive advantage. But one thing I would stress, though, is that transformation at the end of the day is all about people and culture. And I think a number of the panelists have already kind of covered that, right? And creating a different type of collaboration across the ecosystem. I'm very glad to hear the comments around the open standards that are really developing. I think for transformation to become really powerful and successful, it is really important that we break down barriers between different industries, we break down barriers between what's perceived as customers and partners, right? And we do drive a different type of collaboration, which allows companies to leverage technology and solutions in a different way, right? So the way I'm thinking of it is transformation in the digital age is kind of technology driven to some degree, but it's really people powered. And that's a balancing act most companies will need to master.
Okay, so this makes a good segue to the next question, because my next question is about automation. And Richard was talking about the workforce and digitizing the workforce itself. But here, when we're talking about automation, how important is end-to-end service assurance for service providers, for telcos, to ensure that kind of workforce digitization? Question is for Charbel.
So thank you all for your time today. It's really a pleasure to be virtually surrounded by such great minds. And one thing I'm enjoying lately about virtual meetings, you don't have to wear face masks. So it's good to you can speak more openly, and it's better to be always free. So one of the things that I want to mention, we have been talking a lot about, and I have heard a lot about digital transformation in this topic in specific. And if you want to look today about COVID-19 and the impact and how it accelerated all that. Actually, one thing we noticed is that COVID-19 itself was like a stress test for operators, right? Agility, capability to cope with a new norm. It's about how operators today were able to really support such a system and keep and still be the catalyst for organization to really adopt such trend and being able to bring all that to motion. And actually, even though we're always focused about COVID-19 and its impact on digital transformation, but operators and carriers in general have always been the catalyst for digital transformation as a moderator for it, right? So we realized that very well. And for them to achieve success in the marketplace was always to embrace the shift towards 5G, embrace the shift toward Internet of Things, having software-defined networks in place, adopting high-resolution video, and that was one topic of regulation, which we adopted here. But that's one of the things that carrier in general were trying to build. And on top of all that, we have seen cloud services as kind of offering being adopted by service provider in the region to host and offer services to organization, and all that with a responsibility on how they are able to manage very well from an operational and capital expenditure, all that costs, right? That one was one of the things that they wanted to drive. And all that comes with more high responsibility towards the communities they are serving, how they can keep those services up and running for them, how to maintain such services, how to keep the value being always given to the customer and making sure their experience is always highly maintained, right? So all this, if you want to look at it from that perspective, so operators had actually a very dumb task to make sure that the scalability they were looking at, the flexibility, of the infrastructure is always enabled and delivered for a high quality experience. We have seen OSS in the region for some specific service provider and on a worldwide scale as well, trying to always making sure that the performance is extremely good, how they are able to remove the complexities of networks they have, which that's why service assurance, and in specific, I would say in service assurance, we need to look at the universal performance monitoring and universal performance management, where we're not only dependent anymore at one kind of monitoring tools or NMS that looks only at a specific part of the network. So service provider has to look at all the layers together, from the access layer, from the mobile layer, to the core layer, for example, to the edge. So all these should be looked together into one platform, because today, if you want to look at how things have happened during COVID-19, so people working from home were interacting with their cloud services. So everything was really interacted, everything was maintained in a very integrated way, right? So that's why service assurance, universal performance monitoring are essential to help service providers mitigate that challenge. And that helps them actually a lot on how they are able to avoid outages, how they are able to re-share and launch new services by reducing time to market. And we have seen agility was one of the things that was raised actually in one of the by one of the panelists. If not mistaken, I guess Jihad, you reported on how fast organizations were able to cope by using the services they have launched and making sure they go much more faster to the market. And the most important piece about service assurance is being able to take corrective actions, right? Being able to take corrective actions upon network performance degradations. And those actions should be really actions based on proper decisions, based on performance of access, performance of the whole layer, being able to have like a mechanism that's baselining the whole performance from the end user till the service they want to access, being able to collect all these performance metrics along the way, apply intelligence, data science, formulas on top, which is machine learning, if you want to name it, to make it more fancier, if you want to give it more lemon twist. It's applying machine learning to all these performance data that we have collected so we can take proper corrective actions, right? And those corrective actions shouldn't be simply in a way we drop an alert to someone so they can get back. We need to automate stuff. We need to be fast. We need to be agile, because things are not anymore. So people expectations are extremely high. People are expecting to be able to access their data anytime, anywhere, from everywhere, right? And they will never be really patient about not having that service available. So that's why service assurance for service provider is extremely important. And you need to have proper KPIs in place, proper capability of having advanced machine learning techniques that yield to self-healing automated network, which is fully based on performance metrics, which is fully objective. And it should be always end-to-end, so you can monitor the whole chain of communication.
Okay, thanks, Charbel. So let me divert the question then to Abdullah. Do you agree with Charbel about the importance of that end-to-end automation for you as a service provider and as telco?
Jay, if you allow me just to address, before going to that topic, the issue that raised by Jihad, if Zoom and other applications will be there after COVID. And I believe, this is a personal belief, that the life after COVID, it will be different than what we used to have. And this is also what has been stated by Sheikh Mohammed. And part of the agenda of the government, we have Ministry of AI have been allocated or giving the responsibility of remote working applications. So for sure, such type of application will be there. Is it exactly the same or different? That is up to the regulatory here in UAE. But it's part of the agenda of the government, and everybody's flexible here in UAE to adapt. And we notice it, and we see it in the beginning of the pandemic, that everybody was flexible and new activity has been done. So back to you, Jay, in terms of end-to-end automation, we believe that we are already in the era of telco automation. Automation is not option for us. It's mandatory going forward. End-to-end automated service assurance for telco deliver immediate opportunities around improving customer experience, delivering organization agility, and efficiency, and also tackling challenges in terms of complexity of business model going forward. Telco are focusing on the internal digitization by digitizing their cares. So we know a lot of operators automated their contact centers and care services. Sales, a lot of movement toward e-commerce and providing service online, and processes. However, shifting to new technologies such as cloud network and applying advanced analytics using machine learning and AI will enable intelligent assurance to achieve extreme operation automation in the network, paving the way for zero-touch network operations and as well as network self-healing. So a lot of, in Etisalat, we have adapted self-healing, and a lot of activity actually is, or a lot of faults is triggered and fight by the AI application and resolved immediately before being an issue that impact the customer experience. So Telco will continue investing, and it's expected that Telco will invest in AI around 11.2 billion by 2025. And also, as per GSMA, 1/3 of the operators are expected to automate 80% of their operations by 2025. So back to you, Jay.
Yeah, Jay, can I add one comment? Jay, if you allow me for 30 seconds, I think it is indeed true that telco has a very central role in enabling digital transformation and the investments that they're making, as Abdullah talked about it, especially in the context of 5G, right? And 5G being a very end-to-end infrastructure, which includes private networks, edge clouds, augmented technologies, what have you. But the real challenge is for you to fully harness the power of this infrastructure. What we are increasingly seeing that 5G will be offered as a platform, as a service play to consumers and enterprises going forward. And that what we believe in Nokia Bell Labs in the years to come will be the big shift, because no application service provider would reasonably program or process the underlying network infrastructure, the any-hole setup, the home setup, the industrial setup. So in order to expose the full value of the network so that the application developers who are experts in the area of industrials and enterprises can fully leverage the power of telco's 5G network, that is where the big promise is going to come from, right? And that's the next shift in terms of transformation and leveraging that investments in end-to-end 5G that we are trying to set up at the moment. So that's really, really important as part of the transformation strategy.
So it definitely applies to 5G, but I think it has a higher level of operation, which is, the automated service assurance is an issue that's going to apply to the telcos, but also to services. So I think in the question when we ask about telcos and service providers, it is a broad term. And here we can also include under it our smart city services. And this is where I think...
I'd like just to add one example of a fully automated service in Etisalat, which also actually has been recognized by the AI Summit here in UAE, and we have been awarded for it, which is an AI application that monitor the traffic in our network and shut down some of the network radio part to be based on the traffic that we have in the network. So it's completely fully automated and actually generated a lot of saving for Etisalat in terms of power utilization.
So it's already
live in the network, and actually we have been saving millions of dirhams from this application.
Oh, that's big. So I think Ghazi here, I wanted to come back to you to address what Abdullah and Fuad had mentioned earlier on, in addition to Charbel. So we've had a lot of information. It would be good to understand, I mean, you've started before AI and data science, and now you've introduced that into the equation. So what do you see the level of automation needed? What is the impact? What's the necessity of having that kind of automation for example, in Etisalat or in other operators to be able to deploy these kind of services?
Thank you, Jay. Interesting question. And so look, digital in a way is or digital technologies. They're there to do two things for us. They're there to either help us optimize what we're doing today, or disrupt what we're doing today. And it's a business discussion. It's a process discussion. So we're either using technology such as AI or anything else to either optimize our current services, so looking at what we do, looking at the process of delivering a current service, and saying, okay, can I use, for example, AI in my call center, as the example was given, or can I use certain data analytics for analysis of the delivery of the service? So digital gives me that capability, all the technologies that we talked about, give me the capability of optimizing. What it also does is give me the capability to disrupt, and this is, I think, where we want to leverage the technology in a more effective way, whether it's being able to now manage and collect much more data than we've ever been able to do, whether it's the ability to analyze this data, and then what do we do with the analysis of this data, whether it's machine learning or people or what have you, but the analytics of the data allow us then to disrupt our business. So looking at different ways of actually approaching our business, or even changing, and this is the discussion from the physical and the digital world. How do you actually implement those digital technologies to change the business model of the digital world? If you think about Uber, one of the simplest things that people did disrupted the transportation industry in a way that it never happened before. But what did they actually do? What did Uber do? It simply created an application that matches the service provider with the end user in a much more effective way. And it disrupted a physical industry in a humongous way, right? So the transport industry and the taxi industry was changed forever. Now, if you talk about the technologies that we have today and the ability to disrupt the businesses that we have to use those technologies in that sense. Clearly, many of the colleagues are talking about optimizing, of course, the service delivery process for a telco or for an enterprise or for a city. How do you engage with customers? How do you engage technologies to allow you to have a better experience for the customer, to deliver on the right points in terms of the touch points with the customer, but also looking at the data and the ability, the digital technologies that provide us data analytics, machine learning, what have you, AI in general, to allow us to change and disrupt the current either process or the business model overall. I think this is where certainly where we spend our time with our customers and with governments across the region, smart cities across the region, say, let's think about what is it that we want to do, how do we want to do it, and then how do we use technology eventually to enable us to do this quite differently. Okay, great. So then in this case, then what I see is that there is a gap that we have seen over the past couple of years when we started to talk about digital transformation. Those who have been proactive and those who have been waiting it out to see what's going to happen. Now, before COVID hits, it really didn't matter in a way. I mean, I don't want to say that word specifically, but waiting another year would not have been a big deal on the operation of a company if it didn't digitize. And for an operator or the telco service provider, they can focus on the ones that are digitizing because the technology was ramping up. So you didn't see this massive need or necessity for that transformation to be more available and more adopted across the market. So I want to ask this question for Rahman in this case. I mean, we've seen this issue happen at multiple industries. We've seen it happen with education. Schools that have been implementing their own management systems, they have done well. Schools that have not, and they tried to do something there, it kind of broke. We've seen it in healthcare. Those that were doing telehealthcare, they kind of transitioned and continued that transition, but those who didn't kind of gave up. I mean, we've seen it across the board. What do you think needs to be done? And what kind of contribution do you think the technology vendors can give to close that gap? Sorry, it was a long question, but it's really a thesis for a PhD in this case. You're on mute, Abdurrahman.
Okay, sorry, apologies. Thanks again for the question. Yes, it's long, but I think it's precise. based on the collective input from all, I believe we all agree that pre-pandemic, anything that must do has become now, if it's not done, if it's not there, then you're out of business. That's why digital transformations becomes no question mark. If you are a small and SME, or if you are a large enterprise. What would articulate all of that is another barrier you have, which is the cost reduction, the cost optimization. Probably throughout the transformation of the IT life cycle, we have never seen a fast and rapid adoption other than the cloud. Why? Because it addresses the business requirement, because of lowering the cost, where organizations really need to lower the cost. At the same time, they need to maintain innovation, they need to maintain growth, if they are in, or more services if they are in the government or company or service provider. So you cannot have all of that without having a strong foundation of IT. In the past, all the spending in the past, you cannot accommodate it with the lower expectation. So I think cloud is the way forward for many organizations. And I'll come back to you regarding schools and healthcare that you just mentioned. Plus, which is another fundamental element, the cloud can provide, it doesn't limit you, any solution now you have is not limited to what you have. It's what other information you can capitalize on for you to provide. And that is something cannot be neglected. The disruption Ghazi was referring to, it was a choice of business. If you want to do something different, they need to get disrupted. And at a point of time, it becomes a fact whereby whatever made you successful in the last 12 months will never make you successful in the last 12 months. Now, regardless of all of that, if you are not being disrupted, if you don't have a very much low cost in your operation, ideally cloud, and that's why every single company is going for this. And if you think of it, look at the startups. Majority of the startups are all going in cloud because they want to franchise the basic foundation information and get that access to information. Schools who had the luxury of, some school again, who had the luxury of sharing the IT experience. Now I've seen it with my kids. When kids with almost 8 years old, she's looking into her education on the IT platform. It's completely different. Everything is available for her. All of those new technology has been adopted in the last 3 to 6 months. When there is a need, it becomes then a real when there is a requirement, a need immediately comes to get it activated. I think we are totally in a different situation, even though now the post-pandemic, I think we will have, because now we have been working much longer than we used to do, because of the lesser disruption on traffic or traveling or many aspects. That's create a momentum and a mindset in with ourselves in order to change the way we live and the way we operate and the way we get things done. So in the bottom line, I believe technology is the key enabler to drive things, but cloud becomes the ultimate, probably the only way forward for organization to continue serving or to continue innovating or to continue working with peers of other companies.
Okay, so Charbel, then Rahman is saying that cloud and cost optimization are the catalyst to bridge that gap across all these different sectors, which I definitely tend to agree with him. But do you have a different angle or additional catalyst that you can share with us?
Yeah, so I agree on the cloud, and usually when I'm sitting with customers, etc., I tell them that data centers are becoming like the new real estate business, right? So everyone is building cloud, try to rent services. It's a new real estate business. Let's admit the fact. So you see a big boom in SaaS, infrastructure as servers, name it, whatever you want, right? So, but all these are cloud provision services. So the cloud importance, actually, if you want to see why people need to adopt the cloud, is for the simple fact that people need to have the data always available, right? Always present, always secure. That will help on top of the agility, increasing the agility of organization. It's going to help them as well reduce kind of the capex they have to spend on building their own data centers, right? But the other aspect of the cloud is how we're going to make sure the data is always accessible, right? So that's a huge importance. So the same way, if you have your data in a place, independent of where that place it is this cloud or on-prem, like traditional data centers, if you're not able to access that data, all that investment you have done on transitioning to the cloud or moving towards the cloud didn't satisfy your objectives, right? So access to the cloud is as equally important as moving to the cloud, right? And lately, if you want to look at the last 10 years in general, and you have seen a lot of topics around such discussions in today's panel discussion, is applications have been extremely developed in the last 10 years. Applications has become more mature, while network as network access layer were not that much advanced, right? So we have invested more into data center networks by making them more software-defined network, SDN, in there, but we forgot about the access layer a little bit on how we're going to make that access layer more, I would say, agile, more flexible, right? So that's why we're going to see all the people who have adopted the cloud face a tremendous issue. Okay, we have now the data there. How we're going to make sure the access is more seamless and less costly, right? How we're going to be able to leverage the internet layer to have a better access and faster access with a cheaper cost to the cloud services like Office 365 or any kind of cloud services if servers there. So that's why you see SD-WAN or software-defined WAN, if I want to name it, is the new trend of the access layer, because it's going to offer you the flexibility of being able to make decisions on which type of media you want to use based on the performance of the media and based on the data location and where this data is available. And service provider play a major role into spreading the SD-WAN kind of concept to end users or to organizations, because as Fuad mentioned on the 5G capabilities, right? Having the 5G much more shifted to organization as a media layer, which is much more faster and it's going to offer better time to market for organization to pop up new locations, or even for people working from home to have better decisions on that. So SD-WAN is kind of the new access layer and the new trend to enable really cloud services adoption or hybrid models if organizations want to remain as hybrid or SaaS adoption. And this should be supported by the service provider as kind of provisioning that to end users, to organization as part of their network function virtualization and capabilities to be managed by them.
So Fuad, then in this case, do you think that then cloud transition, and if we pay attention to the access layer and invest in the access layer, do you think that's enough, or do you need another catalyst to increase? I mean, we really need to accelerate the acceleration of digital transformation.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because I think we believe that no longer network and cloud are separable. In fact, cloud is going to move into the network, and the network is going to reside at the edge. And that's where the power of the infrastructure will be. So no longer they are separable in location. The cloud network functions and the whole application suite, whether it's analytics, security application, intelligent AI applications, low latency control applications, all will co-reside in the edge infrastructure. And that is going to become the most important asset, if you will, to drive and orchestrate this new reality of the value creation. But I would also want to articulate a little bit about this gap that you mentioned, Jay, in terms of the digital mature industries and the consumers and the enterprise. I think our industry has largely been guilty or deficient in treating consumer enterprise largely in similarish ways, if you will. But in the future world, the way we see it, the enterprise have to build separate private networks. They can be managed and orchestrated by the telcos, but the requirements for these industrials and enterprise are much more regimental in terms of servicing the high performance, low latency security needs for these enterprises. And let me give you an example of our own, what we call the Nokia Conscious Factory. We started our transformation back in 2014, where we wanted to build a future factory vision, fully agile, self-automated, self-organizing factory. But with the way we build it is we wanted to implement a private networks with an edge cloud construct, housing all the application layer to try to drive extreme robotics automation so that we could have software defined reprogrammability of controlling machines that can actually orchestrate the moving of autonomous vehicles. We implemented what we call the augmented control and cognition systems for digital twinning so that you can actually replicate your work environments. We also looked at geolocalization technologies so that you could safely position equipment, all because we wanted to augment human workers. And in the case of now post-pandemic, what it ended up doing, it enabled our ability to remote XR operations. And what I mean by remote X, the ability for us to remotely do everything, diagnose operations, interact, manipulate, assemble, all of those functions. And that particular environment of the manufacturing, the supply chain is very different when it comes to the consumer kind of requirements. So that's what I'm insisting our stakeholders and our industry to start thinking about the requirements that will be necessary for us to fully harness the potential of whether it's cloud or network coming together, how the 5G plus layer will be offered to these things to try to drive the productivity, efficiency, and safety dimensions. Because what we have seen and observed that we have actually a 30% year-on-year productivity improvement as a result of that, and a huge improvement in terms of our product lifecycle cost and other things. But the last point I wanted to make is that this reality, in order to make this happen, you must look at the supply side effect, because you have built a supply infrastructure which has been good enough up until now. Because somebody mentioned education systems. Yes, my kids and your kids and everybody's kids are doing some remote learning. Yes, we have been able to do telemedicine. But when you look at the full plethora of our services in the education and healthcare sector, it's probably 5 or 10% of that. Because the healthcare sector, you want to fully automate it in such a way that maybe other remote procedures can also happen. So that is the remote X life. You want to create an education environment that is fully immersive, where you can have haptic touch and all of that. And that all requires this ubiquitous, highly distributed, intelligent, AI distributed environment powered by what we call the underlying nervous system, which is the 5G network. And that is going to be the foundation enabler of this digital transformation.
Okay. Jay, just a comment on what Fuad was saying, if you allow me.
Yeah, sure.
Fuad, it's a bit difficult, and trust me, I mean, I've served my time in telcos, obviously. It's a bit difficult to convince telcos to offer private networks, okay? I worked with the team at that time on trying to do this. Telcos like to control the network, telcos like to offer the service. I have a different ask from telcos, I mean, in terms of enablers for digital transformation. In the current time that we're saying with customer, anything at the intersection of healthcare and IoT and digital is really needed. So IoT devices, either cameras or sensors or any type of device that transmit information. So I urge the telco community to fast track and push the NB-IoT deployments, the 5G and NB-IoT, but not only from a technology perspective, from a product perspective. The main challenge that at least I see from my perspective when I'm dealing with
product perspective, can you?
Yes, sir. The main challenge that there is somebody as well. The main challenge that I see is the prohibiting factor of the connectivity prices. And I'm not talking consumer connectivity. Consumer connectivity, it's something different. It's not something we're going to discuss here. The main point that I'm discussing is general B2B connectivity, where we're treating fleet management, IoT devices, the same way we deal data packages. And this needs to be rethinked.
But Jihad, this is legacy thinking, right? That's what I mentioned. The future is offering your network as a service. So what will happen tomorrow going forward is basically you will expose your 5G network in a way that becomes as a service. So the business model will become much more SaaS-like, if you will. And that's a different ball game altogether. And I completely agree with you. It's not easy for telcos, but I say to my telco friends, there is no alternative path, because the growth is in that sector. You better become partners, because you are building this intelligent infrastructure. It's a matter of exposing the value of this infrastructure to enable the transformation of that larger physically digital augmented industries, right? So that's what we are saying. So, yeah.
But this is a very big ask of a telco to make. Because not only they're changing their business model themselves, they don't know what's the impact if their competition in the same market do not follow suit, and they are the only ones that are trying out uncharted territories. So how do you break it down to a ask that they can actually implement?
Yes, that's a fantastic question. In fact, I had the pleasure of working briefly with Jihad when he was at DO, where we were actually trying to triangulate a partnership agreement with, let's say, the port authorities, the telco, and ourselves, where we actually can first look at what are the use cases that telcos needs to automate? Because there are two parts in front of the end enterprises, the end customer, right? Which is they can actually build on their proprietary, largely fixed proprietary technology solutions, which has a certain financial and technology profile, or they can use the general purpose nature of the 5G ICT systems, right? So if you can compare and contrast and show that value, and then if you can enhance what I call the spur factor, the safety, productivity, efficiency factor, and you can create the operating profit gains for the end enterprises, there is no reason that you can actually not pivot your business model to do a revenue share agreement with the end enterprises. So that's what I'm saying is, I think it is probably difficult for us to comprehend, but the telcos are stuck in this consumerish world and there is so much they can do. So yes, it's a challenging way forward, but I think if we broker that tri-party agreement and look for this industrial enterprise opportunity, because not only at the telco business level, I fundamentally believe because of the distribution of supply chain, the geopolitics that we are looking at, the role of telco will become much more localized, and to ensure that the industries can actually grow at the back of that investments that they're making, right? So that's where I think we should start. Look at which sectors you want to go after, look at the use case dynamics of those sectors, and then expose, as Jihad was saying, the capabilities of your network, but don't do it in your traditional way because it's too complex. You have to expose your network as a platform and offer them as a network as a service model, right? And that's where we can help.
Honestly, this is because I want to.
Can I respond to?
Big topic. It's a big topic.
No, I was going to say this is a topic that we need. This question and this topic should be taken aside, and I will talk to Toni to make it into another webinar specifically just on that topic, because honestly, I want to say a lot about this, but as a moderator, I'm holding back a little bit.
I'd like to highlight one point, just tackling this point.
Yeah.
Actually, here in UAE, we are pushing like government sectors and also some private sectors to come and discuss with us having like network as a service using the slicing capability of 5G. The challenge that we have that some of these entities, they are trying to build their own 5G network.
That's right. That's exactly
which is wrong. We told them, you are investing
but Abdullah, I mean,
come with us and work with us. But we are willing to offer network as a service.
Absolutely. But think about it, right? If let's say Etisalat, that's great that you are moving with that kind of vision. But let's say if you're
one minute for this,
just one last minute. Let's say I was talking to somebody in Spain, right? There's a large bank called BBVA. They said, look, we love our telco friends, but they're too slow. They can't get up to speed on this. So therefore we have to build our own, right? So to your point, if Etisalat has the vision, the courage to go proactively, then of course they should listen to you, right? But they have a genuine need at the moment. So you can't blame the fact that they would have aspirations, but if you have a solution that they can be offered, then that's great, right? So I'm really pleased to hear that.
I would say this goes beyond vision. I said I should not say anything, but this goes beyond vision and courage. This is going to take an ecosystem play. I mean, this will involve.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yes.
You need to pull together to make it a new business model in a way. It's not one operator that can go out and say, I have this new way of doing things.
Sorry. But, we have to continue the question. We don't have much time. Richard, I guess, have something to say because Abdullah, I will have call with you about this because in UAE, the government is pushing everyone. In fact, not anyone pushing the government.
Toni, I'm leaving.
They push anyone, even elderlies, to be digital, have digital behavior. You know this.
By converting UAE, they are partnering with the government, so
we'll have different talk about this. Sorry, Jay, but because we have to continue the panel.
No, because I have the difficult question specifically for Richard at the end. So I have the best prize for him. So this is a really good bridge to this one. So we talked about the different sides that have digitized, and we talked about what telcos can do in terms of offering these kind of services. We will recap everything at the end, but what the big issue we are facing here is that you talked about startups having an easy way of migration. the big companies have the budgets and the resources. What about the 80% of the companies that, or the enterprises that face resource and budget constraint, and they have a choice to invest either in a core business in order to drive their growth, or invest in new technologies, which is uncharted for them, it's unfamiliar, but it will generate growth and efficiency. So if I have a 100, 200 employee organization, company, and I have to make that decision, I would personally be confused about what would be the right way moving forward. What advice would you offer, and how would you convince companies to digitize in this case?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. It's a very tricky question. And I think the discussion we just saw between kind of how telcos are thinking about their business models, and especially as industry lines are blurring, it's definitely a hot topic, right? So I think the way I think about it is most industries are, if not all, right, are currently playing this two-sided game that you talked about there, which is one is defend and cost transform your traditional business model, kind of drive maximum profit from it, take that profit, help fuel investments over on innovating new digital kind of business model solutions for your customers, right? But the challenge, as you rightly say, is for an incumbent company with lots of employees, been around for some time. How do you drive that type of transformation across those two major strategies, especially as they are so fundamentally different practices and require different mindset, different approach, and I'd probably also say different talent, right? And I think in the race to transform business models in this kind of rapidly evolving digital world that we've talked about, it's very exciting, daunting. It's kind of become very kind of critical to business survival to keep high pace, and that's good, but it's also very important for companies to learn how to check for the blind spots, right, where hastily implemented projects may be creating unintended consequences downstream in the business and instead create friction in the customer journey. So I think it's important to constantly kind of balance the strategic holistic approach with fast tactical activities. And I'm kind of a little bit sorry also to say that to make things even more difficult, traditional transformation models and approaches don't really seem to work in today's digital world, right? And kind of don't really give the results that companies are looking for, which is creating this transformation dilemma that I think is starting to happen, right? And it depends a little bit which research you look at, but about 75 to 90% of respondents in various recent surveys report failed expectations from digital transformation programs. And the big question is, why is that, right? And I think personally, it's near impossible to predict the future in these uncertain times we live in. And it's really difficult to know what is kind of coming around the next corner. And therefore, transformation has gone from in the past, I guess, to some degree, a time-bound activity where you had a start and some sort of a stop. I don't think that exists any longer. I think it's now continuous. Transformation is a constant and it's a continuous activity, and companies need to build capability and organize in a different way to kind of do that, right? Hence, traditional approaches to transformation don't really work. And what are the new approaches then, right? Because new approaches are needed. I think an approach that you kind of need to do is to take a holistic approach to transforming across the whole business, but at the same time, need to be very good at breaking it up into micro transformation activities so that it's kind of pragmatic and it's fast paced, and it allows companies to constantly learn from what works, what doesn't work, and how do you adjust and how do you tune as you go forward, right? And an approach to transformation that focuses in on this is kind of looking at it from a business model lens, and really trying to look at what is it that you need to execute and what is it that you need to change in your business architecture to kind of execute on those business models. And I think my final point on it is to execute continuous transformation in the world we live in today. It's also more important than ever to kind of think about it from who am I going to work with, right? And I think in these kind of uncertain times, as we mentioned, no one can, as we discussed, right, precisely predict the future. No one really knows exactly what's coming around the next, the next corner. So I think having dynamism is becoming a critically important ingredient for all companies. And therefore, it's really about, how do you work together with your partners? And as previous panelists have talked about, in this kind of open ecosystem approach, right? To dynamically adapt to the change that's going on around you. And this type of partnership, I think, for me at least, it's fundamental. One fundamental is trust, right? A shared philosophy and approach on how to work together in a co-creation model that drives real business outcomes, equally important for sure, right? I mean, I think the traditional customer-supplier relationships that we've seen over the years, they won't really work. And it's time for a new kind of partnership business model that drives an integrated partnership instead to drive transformation together in a trust-based environment where both sides also feel comfortable working in a transparent way and constantly adjust and evolve to that journey that you're kind of taking together. So I think, Jay, it's really difficult to say which one does a company need to focus on. Is it maximizing and leveraging the traditional business model, or is it innovating in the new? I personally believe it's about balancing act. And I think this is a great opportunity for business leaders to shape the future. I mean, I think, as this famous quote says, never lose a good crisis to kind of drive positive transformation. I personally believe right now is when tomorrow's leaders are shaping it. And from my perspective, it's really important for companies to place great focus on how should they transform, and an equal, focus on how we do the transformation as it is to what it is we're trying to transform into. And therefore also to really focus on who are they going to partner with. Okay, so actually, there could be so many different point of views that can make up another topic for definitely. So actually, one of the actions here, because what I want to do are two things. So one, I want to launch a poll, and I would like to ask the participants to answer the questions. There are 3 simple questions, and then we're going to share the results at the end of the seminar. The second thing is, over the next 5-10 minutes, please do finalize your Q&As, not the Q&As, the Qs, so that we can get to the A's. The 2 actions we want to take now is, one, we need a separate discussion about how telco's business model as a service can actually change the digital transformation accelerated. I've seen a lot of discussions, different point of views, but they're all going towards the same direction. So it would be good to brainstorm as an industry from a vendor perspective, telco perspective, and a smart city perspective as a consumer. So these 3 elements are definitely tied. We've seen a lot of discussions around one, the adoption of cloud, the investments beyond data centers. We talked about, for example, the platform that can bridge the enterprise with government services. Abdullah talked about the AI application that can save millions of dollars. So we are seeing a lot of activities. I think what we want to think about next is how to tie it in terms of alignment between what the vendors are offering to the telcos in terms of assurance of services, in terms of AI and machine learning, data science, a lot of these solutions. We have to admit that there is still not confusion about which one is better and which one is not. There is confusion about the ROI and when should we be doing that. So there are a lot of variables, which is then at the end delivered to the consumer or the enterprise or the B2B side. So that topic, I think we need to take it to the next level, but I think today we have covered quite a lot of points. And let me start by launching the poll as a beginning. And now we're going to allow panelists to vote. There you go. We'll close it in about 15 minutes. So with that, I think we can, we have quite a few questions. So by the time they start or continue to type up their questions, let me start with this one. This one is very interesting, and it takes it above the technology level, which is, do you believe after COVID-19, we will continue to work from home and be supported by our organization's top management? And how do you ensure that the organization and employee rights are preserved? I mean, I'm paraphrasing a little bit.
Jay, can I comment on this?
Yes, sure. Go ahead. This is free for all.
Oh, fine. Okay, but I think at the heart of this question is still an old-minded kind of. I mean, excuse me. I don't mean any disrespect, but the question is framed in an old-minded perspective. And it's minded in a way that you want to clock in and clock out. And how do I simulate clock in and clock out at home? No, there are definitely ways to do this. But again, at the heart of transformation is not only applying technology, it's applying a mindset change to the management, to the culture, to the people, to the employees, to how you do business. Yeah, and that's extremely important. And that's something we saw. So some organization, mainly let's say like government, larger one who were interested in keeping that process, we were able to discuss with them kind of facial recognition cameras, so to prevent the contactless application, okay? And there are other tools where you can use your mobile that allows you to check in and check out. But it's really, it needs to be taken to the next level where a transformation discussion in the culture is implied in the organization.
Yeah, so Jihad, as you mentioned, to really put it in a perspective, so digital transformation is not about simply supplying a technology. It's about integrating the technology in the people mindset and having the right process to adopt such a technology. So the three together, the people, the process, and the technology should be properly integrated, put in a proper perspective to get it there, right? So that's how it's all about, right? And it's about moving. The fact sitting in an office is not going to help. It's much more about being able to do your task from everywhere and having the right mindset to achieve an objective independently of, as you had mentioned, about simply putting in a way where you're clicking the clock or ticking it from checking in or checking out.
Yeah, but I have a follow-on question that's fairly related to it, which is, and it addresses also the gap issue we discussed. One of the questions here, and I'm going to paraphrase again, that while there are quite a few companies that have digitized and are okay with a mobile workforce, with all the tools and all the all the tracking, recording, and regulation already digitized. What do you do with the companies that are not at that phase, and will not be in, and will continue to be in this phase for quite a while, where there is strict enforcement of working hours, there's strict enforcement, and as soon as COVID ends, those strict rules are going to come back. So again, it goes back to the gap we discussed, but do you have any tools or supplies or any technologies that can help them track remotely their working hours? Open for all, whoever feels like they can answer.
Jay, I commented on this, if I may. I mean, there are different tools you can use. I mean, one way that we're applying inside our organization is using teams, let's say. So you know who's started working, who was when we were in total lockdown. You can have channels and teams where it enhances productivity, it improves the way you deal and work with business. But for those, again, who are resisting and wants to keep that clock in and clock out mentality, as I said, there are facial recognition cameras. Now, the funny thing we had implemented this a little bit before COVID, and the masks were not imposed. So we took a facial scan of the people who were deploying at the Office of the Future for one of our shareholders, VIA. And the challenge was to, what do you call, registered employees into the system. Now they came back after after the COVID lockdown was open, and they came back to the office, but they had a mask. So the challenge was, do you re-register those faces, or do you ask them to remove the mask and walk into the building? So that was a bit of a challenge, but the tools are there.
Okay, so what I want to add, like you said, this is a little, like I said, it's a bit above the technology, but I want to go back to one single point, that this is going to require a cultural change. Yeah. A culture change at the individual level, at the company level, even at a national level, because all of these are interrelated. And this is going to take some time, but it can be accelerated by the technology itself. So this is, I would like to end that topic on this one.
And most important, Jay, on the leadership level of any organization, that's the most important piece, at the leadership level of an organization.
But also at the individual level. So it starts with the leadership, and the implementation has to go at the individual. I agree with you. So I have an interesting question. How do you measure digital transformation progress? I think Ghazi would make a good candidate for this one.
How
do you measure with your customers that they are doing?
You add 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, and you get to 4. Look, this is what we talked about in the beginning. It's when you want to go through a digital transformation process, there has to be an outcome. Either you're optimizing something or you're changing the business model. And if there's a specific outcome, there's a specific indicator that tells you whether you're getting to that outcome or not. So that's the simple answer to how you measure. You want to make sure as you undertake digital transformation initiatives, whichever they might be, and then there's a specific outcome that you expect. And then throughout the process, you're measuring. And today with the technology, with data and analytics and so on, you're able to do that throughout. So utilizing digital technology also to measure your progress in terms of digital transformation. Where are you hitting the right milestone? So it has to be done way at the beginning. You have to provide yourself a key indicator, and then you have to keep measuring your progress versus that indicator. And the tools are there, and they are not difficult to use, actually. And you use the same tools to analyze why you want to transform.
If I may add here, I think it varies from a company to another, or from an industry to others. I mean, if you take it to the government, for example, what's happening in Dubai, the number of automated services result in the number of readiness towards digital transformation. That's why you go with another layer about, this is when they went to high KPIs like being happy or not happy or whatever. So it varies from a company to another. I think it's mainly driven by the amount of services you provide to the customers or consumers.
Okay, great. So I have a question here for Fuad. You mentioned about the bank building their own solutions since they think communication providers are not fast enough. Do you think there are other examples as well and telco companies missing out on opportunities due to acting slow? And what can be done in the telco space for not missing that chance?
Thanks for the question. I think this is an emerging trend in terms of enterprises, and I count banks and others in terms of the enterprise thing. The pursuit of building private networks. And as I mentioned, so banks might have different requirements, but let's say, if you talk about the factory example that I gave you, they have different mission criticality aspects. Their reliability requirements are 6 nines compared to service provider networks, which are, let's say, 99.8% reliable. So there's a huge, in terms of reliability difference. So what some of these industries have done, they've come back to 3GPP and they've said, look, these are our requirements in order to automate our systems, to automate our processes. These are the 6 9 reliability requirements, security requirements, others. If you can standardize, then offer them through your wireless solutions, we'll be happy to consider you, right? Else we'll continue down our proprietary solution route. The problem is they're also at a point where they are not fully optimizing because they are largely fixed. When you have fixed solutions on factory floors or what have you, you're not moving the processing function or the control function to the cloud environment. And as a result, the pace of innovation and some of the transformation that you have to do on your efficiency and productivity is slowed down. So they are in need for that. They're desperately in need for that. So assume that whoever it is, whether it's the Telefonica in Spain or whoever, right, or Etisalat in UAE, if they were preemptively going to these enterprises, industrials, to understand some of their transformation needs, understanding and taking those use cases and translating and transforming them into evangelizing the virtues of these networks and how they can actually meet those critical requirements that they have, I think there will be an opportunity. But if we don't, which obviously the challenges are big, there's a bigger ecosystem that has to come to in place, the complex business models have to be developed. In that case, yes, there are regions in the US, in Europe, and other places where enterprises are moving pretty fast, where there's the mining companies in Australia that I was talking to, or the utilities companies, they are all thinking about private solutions, right? So, but that is, but the jury is still out. It's not done. It's a matter of the individual situation in terms of readiness of the operator, how interestingly they are able to offer the network as a platform, expose those as a service, and therefore connect that dots. No longer telco can just focus on the consumer and enterprise in a similarish way. You have to segment that. So longer answer, but I'm happy to speak about this subject. We are very passionate about this because that's where I think the bigger industry transformation is happening. And it's no longer the question of telcos or a particular enterprise. I fundamentally believe it's a question of larger economic growth for nations at large. And I think that's where telcos can actually start to pivot as they start to modify their organizational, operating, and technology structures around it. Okay.
Okay, perfect. I have still time for one question, and it is addressed to Richard. You mentioned the importance of dynamism while communicating with the client. Does this mean the organization? So I'm reading, and I'm not responsible for any grammatical errors. So does this mean the organization should be dynamic while providing solutions to their customer, such as early feedback, achieving small targets along the way, and simply not delivering a product but the solution that the customer is looking for?
Yes, I mean, the short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is that's in incumbent organizations, because that obviously is what we talked about, right? That is somewhat difficult to achieve, because I think a lot of organizations over the years haven't set up to service a specific customer base with a set of products and services that combine create solutions, right? Not the least the telcos. Most of it built in-house, working with suppliers to obviously enrich in those solutions and then push through the sales force to customers, whether it's enterprises or small and medium-sized businesses or consumers. I think with where the world is going, a lot of, not the least actually on the B2B side, I think there's more today that will be kind of co-creating solutions where, and telcos do play a fantastic role, I think, and an increasing role there to kind of help other organizations in different industries to make use of the capabilities they have themselves. But I think telcos also have a fantastic opportunity to kind of tie together a lot of other capabilities coming from a partner ecosystem. To do that effectively and make money from it, you do need to create a lot of dynamism and make sure that you've organized the company so that you have all of your different capabilities, all the way from selling through solutionizing into building and delivering, and obviously operating, set up in a probably a different way to how at least traditionally companies have been organized.
Okay, great. So in wrapping up, what I want to do is I want to share the results of the poll, and I want each of you to give a 1 minute. Let's take maybe 1 minute to read into them and give me your opinion as we wrap up, 1 minute each, what you think of the outcome, and we'll take it from there. So here it is. Do you believe that enterprise has achieved digital transformation? Almost half say yes, the other half say in progress. My question here is, your perspective on when somebody says I digitally transformed, have they actually done it? And in terms of what it means, like we don't want at the end for someone to have a mobile app and call it a full transformation. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at it. Which emerging technologies are important to the global pandemic and acceleration of digital transformation? So cloud, going back to validate what Rahman said, is top of the list. AI analytics comes next. Internet of Things, mobility, 5G are, mobility, AI, and analytics are kind of tied. In second place, Internet of Things, cybersecurity. And which entity should lead the way in bridging digital divide and ensuring access to digital technology for everyone? This is democratization of digital transformation, basically. And who's responsible for it? Telcos, regulators, tech giants, because they got the money, and emerging advanced tech vendors. These are yourselves, basically, all of the above. So let's do a quick round circle. And before we wrap up, I really want to thank each panelist, name by name. Ghazi, Abdullah, Fuad, Rahman, Jihad, Charbel, Richard, and Haithem, who joined us in the first part. You have been really great. And it would be great to get your opinion on that poll. So we start with Ghazi.
Thank you, Jay, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting us, and thank everyone taking the time to listen. I know it's been a couple of hours, so it's great to have so many people still with us. I think answer number one is not possible. I mean, you cannot have achieved digital transformation and having a yes in almost 50%, 43% is at least not realistic as far as I'm concerned, because this is not a specific objective. You might have achieved one initiative under the digital transformation umbrella, but it's just not possible. I think most people are in progress, and that makes sense as long as there's a clear view of digital transformation. Definitely cloud's going to be the big enabler moving forward. AI analytics actually would allow you to understand your business better and deliver these kinds of advanced solutions. So clearly on the technology side, it makes sense. On the delivery side, who's going to be able to bridge the gap and ensure access? All of the above is correct. This is what we've been saying in the beginning. It's going to be an ecosystem play. We have to break down the value chain and eventually figure out everybody's role as we move forward. So I think it makes a lot of sense with that kind of answer at the end. Thank you.
So I think for the rest as well, so that we don't repeat the same outcome, if you have any final thoughts or you have any additional comments you want to add to it, that would be great. So Fuad.
I think I agree with Ghazi's interpretation, because the first one for me was a bit anomaly, because digital transformation for me would be both internally to yourself, but your utility towards your external markets and your customers as well. And I think there's a huge undertaking. So yes, I agree there is a lot to be done and we are in progress. Others makes perfect sense. All stakeholders have to be, but also on the cloud part, right, which I mentioned, the nexus of the new value creation will be those edge cloud infrastructure, because we're going to be moving the network functions and application closer at the edge of the networks and very proximous to you. And that's where the value will be created. So I concur with that answer as well. And of course, everything sort of ties together in that value stack. So over back to you, Jay.
Abdullah, any final thoughts?
Yeah, in terms of the first question, I agree with some of the Ghazi and Fuad that digital transformation is a journey. And if you complete one task, doesn't mean that you completed your journey. You created an end game, and for that aspect only. And if you achieve it, you achieve that aspect. But you should continue with the other aspect within the journey. In terms of the technology, I agree with the guys that currently cloud computing is the most important part of the digital transformation. But this is at the current stage. But in the future, I believe the combination of AI, cloud, Internet of Things, mobility, using 5G will be driving the complete transformation. Autonomous car, without all these technology, it will be a success. Robotics is the same. It's drones. It requires the combination of all these technologies. So going forward, a combination, it will be a must.
So Jihad, any final main message you want to leave us with?
Yeah, actually, I think I have a bit of an interpretation for number one. First of all, that's a biased set, right? So all the people on this call are either telco professional or digital guys or technology. So obviously their organization or their work would be more, they would feel that they've completed more the digital transformation. So that's one way to interpret the number. The other thing is, if you look at how cloud is really high, which is really important, I'm not saying it's not, but I think this is why people answered almost 50% on the first one, because probably they had all the cloud tools they needed, right? We were all forced to have the cloud tools at home. So from video calling to remote access to file and stuff. But I really think that from a technology perspective, it's all of the above. You need all of those, and you cannot discount cybersecurity when you're at least cybersecurity should be as high as cloud computing, for instance. Internet of Things and mobility and 5G would play a major and huge role in this. So I think all of the above from my side.
Abdul Rahman, any final thoughts on your side?
I think I would not. Yeah, I would again, I don't want to add more than what my colleagues just referred to. I think all are identical. Cloud computing, no doubt, is the way forward. Anything associated with, I would say, edge computing is associated with cloud computing. Cloud computing would lead to artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, many aspects associated with it. And what Ghazi stated, it's an ecosystem. It's not necessarily technology provider, telecom provider. It's a complete ecosystem, and we've seen it. We've seen small entrepreneurs who are going into a full-fledged digital transformation. Why? Because they have the right business know-how, and everything is driven by technology provider, by telco provider, as well as by cloud, for example. So I would not disagree with any of those elements.
Okay, so I think what we have consensus here is that digital transformation cannot be measured on a task-by-task basis. It's more of a continuous journey that we get there over time. So one cannot say we have transformed, we are digitized. So it has to be more of a journey. On the second one, it's not one or the other. It's really a combination of these technologies of cloud computing, AI, and I would say 5G are the top three. Cybersecurity is important, and Internet of Things. I'm not sure exactly which industries they touch, or there are places where it can have a much higher impact. But for the most part, we're talking about an equal distribution of these technologies. And at the end, we re-emphasize the need for an ecosystem. So this is an ecosystem play. It's not a one-person play. So with Richard and Charbel, maybe starting with Charbel here, if you can give us just a wrapping thought message about the topic overall, because we shared those results. So if you can just give me one final thought.
So my final thoughts about how we measure digital transformation, right? So I believe there is a misunderstanding of how we measure how much we are digitally transformed. That showed it up. And at the same time, I want to take it a little bit of history. Before, in the last 10 years, we have seen much more trends going through centralization of the data, right? Now we decentralizing much more the data by going to the cloud. But what we need to look at about software defining everything, right? Taking everything in a software defined way. So we can bring that as well on the network function layer, which is much more on the access, to make sure the cloud adoption is much faster and transformation is really much more agile and happening in a much more efficient way.
And, Richard, I give you the final thought in this
Final
case.
I mean, I think again agree with kind of how the conclusions came out. I think that's very powerful. I think I'll use a statement that I used before, which is a lot of digital transformation is technology enabled, but it's really people powered, right? And it's about what we as humans do with the technology to improve the lives of the customers we serve. That really is what it's all about from my perspective.
So with that, I think I've given my thought as well before we wrapped up towards the Q&A. This is going to be an open discussion. More should come. Now we can narrow down on the key topics we highlighted here moving forward. I leave the floor to Toni to give his final thoughts, and we wrap up from there.
In fact, I was just to say thank you for interesting discussion. I was with you all the time. I guess 2 hours is enough. I will not add anything more than thank you to everyone. Thank you.